Welcome to this explainer. We're jumping right into the fascinating and honestly incredibly high-stakes world of strategic decision-making. We usually think about corporate strategy just in terms of profits, market share, the bottom line. But right underneath all of that is this complex web of moral choices. By the time we wrap up here, you're going to have a really clear understanding of exactly how executives navigate these dilemmas, especially when millions of dollars or even human lives are on the line. And our main focus today, the mechanics of what's known as the rights approach. Okay, here's our roadmap. We'll start with the business ethics landscape, then look at 5 ethical decision-making frameworks before zooming in on the rights approach. Finally, we'll explore the conflict between rights and outcomes and how to actually make the strategic choice. First up, the business ethics landscape, establishing the broad context. So the absolutely crucial thing to establish right out of the gate is that business ethics, they aren't some separate alternate set of rules just made up for the boardroom. There's literally no special pass that excuses bad behavior just because you're chasing a profit. Business ethics are the exact same societal standards of right and wrong, just applied to organizational behavior. Think about it. If lying is completely unacceptable at your family dinner table, it's equally unacceptable when you're negotiating with suppliers or marketing to customers. Every single business action has to be judged against those broader societal standards. And this is exactly where the friction happens in strategic planning. Managers are constantly forced to juggle. On one hand, you have internal capabilities, stuff like company culture, human resources, physical assets. And on the other hand, you've got these relentless external forces, legal constraints, a crazy economy, fierce market competition. It's right at this intersection where these competing interests inevitably crash into each other and resources get stretched thin that serious ethical dilemmas pop up and demand an answer. Which brings us to part 2, 5 ethical decision-making frameworks, the manager's strategic toolbox. To survive in these incredibly complex environments, leaders can't just rely on a gut feeling. They need a specific toolbox. Our source materials outline 5 distinct ethical lenses that are used to evaluate moral choices systematically. First, there's utilitarianism, which carefully weighs consequences and outcomes. Then, the rights approach, which focuses on individual choices. Next up is fairness or justice, striving for strict equality and impartiality. We also have the common good, focused on compassion and societal well-being. And lastly, virtue, which looks entirely inward at character traits like honesty. Now, what's genuinely fascinating is how these 5 frameworks split into 2 radically different camps. In one corner, you have consequentialist theories. These judge decisions strictly by its final outcomes, like utilitarianism, which coldly calculates how to produce the greatest good for the highest number of people. But in direct opposition to that, we have non-consequentialist theories, and these place the emphasis entirely on the intention, the inherent duties, or the character of the decision-maker. Basically, they ask, is the action itself right, completely regardless of the final outcome or who actually benefits? All right, let's zoom in for part 3, the rights approach, protecting the individual. Under the rights approach, an ethically correct decision is defined purely as one that respects liberties and does not interfere with the fundamental rights of others. It totally rejects the idea of looking at the broader financial or societal outcome. Through this lens, if a massively profitable, widely beneficial strategic plan steps on the fundamental liberties of even a single individual, well, the framework flags it as ethically wrong, period. There are absolutely no exceptions here, no matter how much money is made or how many other people are helped. So, when applying this framework, managers have to make sure their plans don't violate any of these 6 fundamental moral rights. Every single person affected by a corporate decision possesses the right to free consent, the right to privacy, freedom of conscience, free speech, due process, and above all else, the right to life and safety. If your shiny new manufacturing process puts employee safety at risk, or your new app compromises consumer privacy, the rights approach demands you halt or alter that strategy immediately. The individual's rights trump the corporate objective, every single time. That leads us perfectly into Section 4, the conflict, rights versus outcomes, when ethical frameworks collide. As you can probably guess, relying solely on individual rights often creates some intense strategic friction out in the real world. When you put these 2 ideologies head-to-head, you can really see the collision. Utilitarianism is always looking at the scales, right? Searching for the utility of an action to produce the greatest benefit for the masses. But the rights approach acts as this unyielding shield, saying, hold on, you cannot sacrifice this one individual's liberties just to make the majority wealthier, happier, or safer.
Protecting one person's liberty directly clashes with a leader's mandate to maximize the collective good.
Our sources provide a classic everyday dilemma that hits the nail on the head. Think about it. An individual has a fundamental personal choice and liberty to smoke. That's an individual right. But the public has a right to healthy air, which is a collective utilitarian good. So at what point does protecting one person's personal choice become an unacceptable harm to the wider society? It's tough, because neither side here is inherently malicious, but they are undeniably in direct opposition, basically forcing leadership into a corner. Now, as an executive, your role isn't just to pick one side of the argument and blindly ignore the other. Your job is actually to act as a harmonizer. Business ethics serves as the critical mechanism to thoughtfully reconcile these deeply conflicting interests. Because very often, serving the interest of one party is going to inherently hurt another. Effective strategic management means stepping back, acknowledging the validity of both the individual's rights and the majority's outcome, and finding a structured path forward that minimizes harm while still respecting your core values. Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Making the Strategic Choice, Putting Theory into Practice. So, how do we actually apply these theoretical concepts in a real-world boardroom where millions of dollars and thousands of jobs are actively on the line? Well, the sources outline an incredibly practical four-step model to make sure decisions are structured and logically sound. By walking through these specific steps, managers can ensure they're making complex, ethical choices based on confirmed, objective facts, rather than just relying on intuition, past experiences, or, high-running emotions. Before you can even begin to evaluate a problem, you have to gather a complete, unfiltered picture. Step 1 is detailing the confirmed facts and actions. Step 2 is brainstorming every single potential action your company could take, and this means laying all your cards on the table, which, let's be honest, requires some really uncomfortable honesty in a corporate setting. You have to include even the morally questionable choices your company could take just to see the full scope of the board. You literally cannot afford to overlook any hidden situational elements or unpopular viewpoints. Then comes the heavy lifting. In Step 3, you meticulously group the choices by their implications, explicitly asking who benefits and who gets hurt by each option. Finally, in Step 4, you filter those choices through your chosen ethical framework. If your firm has adopted the rights approach as its core value, this funnel acts as a hard stop. You have to ruthlessly eliminate any alternative that violates the fundamental liberties of your stakeholders. And that's no matter how great the financial upside is or how much the majority might benefit. As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider this question carefully. In your next major strategic decision, will you prioritize the fundamental rights of the individual, or will you compromise them for the greater good of the majority? These frameworks we've been talking about, they aren't just academic theories. They are the very DNA of corporate behavior. The ethical framework you deliberately choose to prioritize when the pressure is highest, that will ultimately define the true moral character of your organization. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.